Yeah. Hitting and catching. Yes. Dom lost a little time earlier this year. Dom carried all the intangibles we just talked about. Dom has them in spades. He's strong. He's physical. Looks the ball over well. Has some impact, and is continuing to improve defensively. I think it's an important offseason for him, and get into camp and see where we are. On him, but he's a player we like. He's a person that we believe in, and we'll see where it goes. Catchers, their development path is far from linear, and we're excited to see what Dom does this offseason, where he comes in next year. And then Johnny DeLuca, I think we felt that one quite a bit. We struggled against left-handed pitching certainly early, but throughout the year our lineup just didn't have, you go back to early last year, it's like we couldn't find a left-handed hitter to save our life. This year it was kind of going the other way. We had a hard time finding guys that could produce against left-handed pitching. Johnny was someone that in his limited opportunities I think would have helped some in that regard. And more so, he was, with all due respect to our players in their entirety, he was the best defensive center fielder on our roster. And you get into the identity of having somebody out there. We've long lived it, be it Jose Ziri, Kevin Kiermaier before him, Manny Margot kind of in between there some. Like, having a lockdown defender in center field is probably as much as our identity that we've had as a team for as long as I've been here, or really close to it. Johnny was our, that was his greatest strength, was to be that type of defender in center field, and not having him, we felt it, and you kind of felt like you were chasing yourself a little bit with different defensive configurations over the course of the season. Going into next year, Johnny and every other player that lost time this year, our expectation is they'll be full go for camp, and we'll just have to see where he is. I think as we construct next year's roster, anytime a player's season is that disrupted by injury and an assortment of injuries, you got to be careful what you're counting on, for the year that follows. But a healthy Johnny DeLuca will be a huge add to wherever we come out going into camp here. Yeah.
Erik, Ryan Bass, FanDuel Sports Network. Junior Caminero, I know, far exceeded maybe anybody's expectations this year, and I'm sure the new ownership group will have a say in this, but when do you start thinking of or having discussions about an extension for him to keep him here long term?
Yeah, well, thank goodness we got him for 5 more here, which helps a lot. So we could say it's a 5-year extension right now if we want to. But no, Junior exceeded every reasonable expectation we had for him, and the reasonable expectations were high. The numbers speak for themselves. They're as good as you will find for someone that is aged 21 into 22 that early in their career. Just a remarkable season. I think what impressed me and us most about Junior, the aptitude, and he has some leadership qualities. He is someone that despite his age, people gravitated to him, watched the way veterans responded to him. There's a really high care factor, and he's charismatic. He has a really good way about him. He cares a lot. For those of you that are up in Toronto, I think it was mentioned. I was sitting up at a suite. I didn't realize it was mentioned publicly, but that they're celebrating, and there's Junior on the bench, and there's Carson, there's Chandler, and when you look ahead to see players like that care that much and are sitting there watching the other team do what they really want to do one day is heartening. And I know your question about Junior, but they're all kind of tied into that. But those are the things that have the potential to really separate him and put him on a rare track that comes with the highest expectations, and he embraces them. So, again, look, back to your question, just couldn't be more pleased with the season he had. I'm going to try to have to manage expectations for him next year, and if he beats them again, that'd be wonderful. Or we won't be here in September, I promise you that. But we'll see. There's a lot of time for that. Just right now, couldn't be more pleased with his progress. And like I said, we got another 5 years here to figure out what's ahead.
A couple other things for you. Could you be a little more specific about Shane? Like, is he going to pitch winter ball? Is he going to be a question mark as you sit here today for next March? I mean,
McClanahan, right?
Shane McClanahan.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Not winter ball. This this has been a tough injury. You know, if you feel the most for Shane, just about ready to take the ball opening day and then have an injury that there's virtually no precedent for it. And then not knowing your timeline, you know, it might be a few weeks, it might be a few months, it might, high confidence it's going to heal, but the timeline kind of up in the air. That's really, really difficult to manage. So our expectation when, you know, right now is that he will be fully ready for camp and good to go as a healthy pitcher, that the additional months of time should allow the nerve to have whatever time is required to heal and then some. So that's our expectation. It's always with the caveat that this is new for all of us and we're doing the best that we can. He is doing everything a human being could do and more to try to be ready. This has been really difficult on him. We're doing everything we can to support him, but our hope is that by the time we get to camp, this is fully resolved. He's on the appropriate throwing program going into camp, and we go from there. Obviously, missing August 2023 through the end of 25, that's a lot of missed time. So you get into kind of, all right, what's best for him and how you build him up and how you do all that responsibly. But our expectation from a health standpoint, and this is at some point here, will turn into a normal winter and a normal build up into camp, and we'll go from there. And that's where we're at.
No additional procedures or anything planned? Okay.
No.
And then how do you view the shortstop position for next year? You got Walls coming off an injury, Williams getting more experience, or even maybe some you weren't planning on, or a third option of going to find somebody.
Yeah, I think that's something we're going to need to spend some time on here early in the winter. Walsey, we certainly appreciate him. I say as much as, you know, any team. You know, the defense's impact. Taylor Wall's the kind of player that when he's playing, sometimes it can be hard to appreciate because of how much of his value is the base running, kind of the little things within the game. Once he leaves the batter's box is really where he separates and he's elite. And he was making some progress in the box as well. But the defense, you appreciate a player like that when they're not available. And, you know, no knock on the other players, but when you have someone that is that elite playing shortstop defensively, you feel it when they're not there. Not unlike when Kevin Kiermaier got hurt and you go to someone else. It's no knock on the next person up, but when you have someone that's that special, usually you appreciate it the most once they're gone, once they're not there. So Walsey should be good to go for camp. Might have been good to go if we were continuing playing here at some point. And he's an important player for us as we go forward. Carson, again, I mentioned Ian Seymour, just trying to make the absolute most of disappointing circumstance with your record to give people opportunity. Carson, wherever Carson goes from here, he will be better for having these experiences. There is no substitute for development than major league feedback, and he got a lot, and with the right mentality to make something of it. We'll see where he's at going through the winter, see where he is in camp, and you keep an open mind for him to do that, but we'll obviously do right by him, and if it's not him, we'll make sure Walsey's in a good spot, but we'll have an open mind to see if there's, if it's worthwhile to make other additions at the position as well.
Given how you broke down this team at the start of this, do you see bullpen as maybe your primary need heading into the offseason, outfield production? How do you kind of assess the roster from that standpoint?
It's a great question. We're going to spend a lot of time on it because, what has happened and what's likely to happen next, sometimes they go this way. And, like I said, if you said our bullpen's going to be at the top of baseball and strikeouts, top and walks, velocity is somewhere up there at the top, great, sign me up. We just gave up the runs and we could least afford to. It seemed like just far too many times. It's a tricky thing to figure out of what's likely to continue, what's not. That's going to be an important focus for us this offseason. And it has some similarities to the runners in scoring position from the year before. We were historically poor, if I'm not mistaken. The year prior, we kind of found our way back into the middle. Over history, when you're that poor, usually you find your way back into the middle, by some tinkering, by some added emphasis, and just by kind of the noise of baseball to a degree. I think some of that probably happens with the bullpen. Multiple guys are close to it. I think had 100 strikeout seasons. There's a lot of talent there. It just didn't happen at the moments where you most needed it. Year over year, usually that stuff cleans itself up to some degree, but we are where we are in part because we didn't get the job done, and you don't want to just brush that away. So we'll spend some time on it. I think candidly, for us, there's two ways to help that. One is to lock down close games. The other is when you have an opportunity to separate a game when you take an early lead, it's the insurance runs. And we didn't separate some games when we had the opportunity to do so quite as often as you'd like. And going back into the Trop from a hitter-friendly environment back into a pitcher-friendly environment, that's something we got to think about also. And, you look at our kind of outfield production in total, that's something that by championship caliber standards, we need to find a way to create more, certainly power, and run production out of that group, as well. So we'll see. Bullpen, sometimes the best bullpens are the ones that were the worst the year before, as it is. It goes that's an old adage just on an individual player level, and it's a group we really like, and we struggled with kind of waiting for it to turn this year. I just never quite got there. But yeah, like I said, trying to figure out what has happened, what's predictive, and how those things intersect is one of the harder parts of our job, and it's hard to see the future, but we'll spend time on that and every other area.
Following up on
Yeah.
that idea, usually this time of year there's a narrative, a young team that's growing, a veteran team that
Yeah.
beats this one bad or whatever it is. This team has sort of defied that stereotype. Do you have to guard against overreacting to the one-loss record and saying this team is this close and just need to make these little moves, or are bigger changes necessary?
When you say defy the stereotype, I just want to make sure I understand you. When you said that, meaning?
The idea that there's this one thing we need to do.
Oh,
We need
yeah.
a third
No,
thing.
yeah, great. It's a great question. I think so. I talked about the bullpen of like, oh yeah, they'll just be better next year because like they're underlying indicators that are typically a better predictor of what's ahead than the performance in those tight games only is certainly there. At the same time, you don't get to say all the great things that happen. Oh, those are going to continue, and all the bad things are just going to get better, right? Like Junior Caminero, Aranda, Yandy, Brandon, those four had incredible years. You can't just assume that's all going to stay right there. You need to build a team that can protect, them coming back to earth a little bit. Like that's part of baseball. I do believe this is a team that, we went in this year, and I think it's similar place next year. You need those guys to continue to develop a little like 22. Like 23 was a lot of fun. I'm not foreshadowing that, but I do think this team is in a place where the right adds and a little bit of development, and our record is meaningfully better than it was last year. The run differential, that doesn't matter for our record this year, but there are other things that will speak into the quality of the team when you look forward a little bit more than your record itself. And do believe from the healthy pitching, getting Mac back, Cammy around it, like I said, those things. I don't want to say we're one piece away. This is a really good division, and it's not about to get any weaker. This is probably going to be a division that has 5 really good teams in it next year, and expect us to be one through development of the players we have, and ideally, an add or two to best complement it.
Erik, I know over here.
Oh,
yeah.
Hey, Evan.
Hey, how are you? I know everything you said in your opening statement. Obviously, so appreciative of Steinbrenner Field, Yankees allowing you to have the season you had, and the fans to be out here on the other side of the bridge. Just when you look back at the season, and you kind of mentioned moving to the Trop, just for the fans to understand, what were the difficulties of building a team that wasn't necessarily made for Steinbrenner Field, and what are going to be some of the things that you're looking forward to next year, of where it's like, okay, some of this stuff is going to normalize next year?
Yeah, it's hard to live on a friend's couch for 6 months, even if they're incredibly welcoming. Look, it's no excuse for anything from a team building standpoint. We had an assortment of arms that are pitched to the top of the zone, above the zone, and early, we went through a stretch where we couldn't seem to win here, and it felt like the wind was blowing out to right when we were pitching and blowing in from right when we were hitting. It was weird. I don't think that was the reason we ended up with the record we have, but it's Chandler Simpson, Jake Mangum. This park isn't like they're built for bigger parks, right? When you put the ball in play, when you have speed, those are players that playing in a place like this, they're not that sensitive to it. Pitchers that pitch with power and pitch up, yeah, you just run the risk of getting bit a little bit more. We did give up a few more homers than we would have liked, but that wasn't all at home, but it's as much just the familiarity. You're visiting, you're renting, you're just continuing to learn an environment all year. And again, it's no excuse for our record, but the Trop is our home. That's what we're used to. That's what we know. And it's a place where day in, day out, you're very aware of what you're going to get, right? You can hold your routines. There's no disruption. And that's something that over time, we've leaned into that. And I think you've seen a demonstrated home field advantage in our record because of that. And goes a lot more than the dimensions or the lack of third deck and the wind and the lighting and all these things. It's home. And there's something to be said for playing at your true home. I got you.
Quick thing for you. One is
Yeah.
you've got three guys at option.
Yeah.
Bailey, you can throw anyway. It's just with Pete and Brandon, as you sit here today on September 30th. How do you
Yeah.
feel about the decision?
Yeah, I remember talking last year on option decisions, and we made a few trades at the deadline. Those are three players with Taylor. They're still here, and so in that sense, I think that's indicative of, kind of where we are. But we got to get into, a greater understanding, kind of. To John, to your point, I think we expect to be a competitive team next year. How do we improve ourselves? What kind of money is required? How you need to allocate it will be a consideration as we get in the winter and find the right mix. But Pete and Brandon, focusing on them because Taylor's still in the arbitration process, depending, regardless of the option decision there. Those are two players that have meant a lot to our organization. We appreciate them both greatly, and going to go in this winter and just see how we can best configure this thing to win more baseball games next year. But nothing, like I said, we didn't move them at the deadline, and usually that's a pretty good sign of how we feel about them.